You're listening to the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT podcast. I'm your host and curator, Rabbi Kivelevitz, and I hope you enjoy this episode. You've bought your tickets. The ushers are about to open the doors. Yes, the Projectionist has Semicha is about to start. But first, if you own a retail business and accept credit cards, your customers are getting points, miles, and all sorts of rewards every time they use their card. And you're paying the price. That's why NRS Pay, a product of National Retail Solutions, a division of the IDT Corporation, offers its cash discount program FeeBuster. You can start accepting credit cards for free. If your business processes over $18,000 a month, you pay no monthly fee and $0 out of your pocket for transaction. This means you, as a retailer, can enjoy the benefits of accepting plastic, and your customers still get those crucial miles they crave and need. NRS Pay FeeBuster provides every client with a free credit card reader with no long-term contract, no early termination fee, cancel anytime without a penalty. I'm personally familiar with this company, and they truly stand by their product, and they'll help you with live, stateside-based customer service on any issue or question. Visit nrspay.com or call 833-289-2767 to learn more about NRS Pay and the fantastically fair FeeBuster. Clear the aisles. The Projectionist has Semicha. I'm here with Rabbi Kolakowski, and as Black History Month proceeds, just as we did last year, Yitzchak, we are going to highlight films that we believe are significant about the history of the African Americans in the United States and in perhaps throughout the world, and bring to light some films that help describe the arc of movement of what occurred in the United States till, of course, the Civil Rights Movement and beyond, and how films reflected that. Yitzchak, I think you've got an interesting place to start here on this. And you're highlighting a director/actor who I know from the reruns of Amos and Andy that I used to watch when I was a kid growing up in Memphis. The character actor who played Andy, Spencer Williams, and your knowledge of film history led you to discovering that he was at the forefront of the African American films that were being made in the 30s and 40s, primarily and almost directly for Black audiences. These were films that were being released and shown only in the urban area theaters that Blacks populated. And they were looking at things from a distance of 40, 50, 60, 70, sometimes 80 years. And we're looking at it, what does it say, and what are the messages as a work of art. Everything that was being produced, and still is about putting posteriors in the seats, about bringing people in and knowing where those people are. And if the film doesn't earn back the monies that were invested in it, then no other films will be made like it, and it's not going to go anywhere. And therefore, we have to understand that it isn't about the inner thoughts or ideas of the auteur or the writer. What we're talking about is the knowledge of everyone involved of how can we make a product that will sell to a specific audience. And in your case, they realized that there was an audience, especially as the 40s and 50s started to advance into the late 50s and 60s. These films were catered to the Black audience. They probably were not even seen by most of white America. And Yitzchak, you've discovered Spencer Williams' role in directing and writing two of them that you want to highlight for us.
And acting. He was acting. And the truth is, you can find the Amos and Andy episodes very easily on YouTube.
Such an embarrassment about them that it was
I think that I don't think you need to edit it out, because I think that's more of an urban legend that's gone around. The same thing about that Bill Cosby bought up the rights to the Little Rascals, and none of that was true. The same thing here. These things, they came into the public domain, and they Amos and Andy, I mean, came into the public domain, and just there wasn't maybe much commercial need for it. But I remember maybe 20 years ago on television there were a lot of commercials, selling. I think it was VHS cassettes of Amos and Andy show. So maybe it was 30. They were trying to sell on television in New York, classic episodes of Amos and Andy. But these movies, I was always aware of his earlier films. That's kind of how he got the role of Andy, because of course we all know originally Amos and Andy on the radio were played by white men, and they actually made one movie called Check and Double Check in blackface in 1930. And then when it came to television in the 50s, they realized they had to actually cast actual black men to play Amos and Andy. And they had heard of Williams because of his career in the black cinema, and that's how he got this role of Andy. And it became so famous for him that when the New York Times wrote his obituary, they only mentioned his role as Andy in Amos and Andy, and totally ignored the fact that he himself was a filmmaker, really an auteur. He was a director, screenwriter, and actor in quite a few movies. And I also was aware of these movies in my youth because I would collect these catalogs that would sell public domain movies. I think it was called Video Yesteryear. It's long out of business. And I would just read the titles and short descriptions of, hundreds and hundreds of movies that they had for sale. I think ridiculously high price. It was something, like $20 for public domain movies that, a lot of them you could pick up in the grocery store for $2-3.org or on YouTube and other places. I finally, got a chance to look at two of the movies that Williams himself made. Both of them he wrote the screenplay or story and acted in, and one of them he directed. And two very different types of movies. Nothing, as far as looking at film in general, nothing particularly special, but knowing where they came from, they're actually quite incredible achievements. This movie, I don't know, I don't know if, on JewishPodcast.org for the Yeshiva of Newark, I don't know if it should be included in the title of the movie should be included, was The Blood of Jesus is the name of the movie. And he made this movie with all amateur cast with a budget of $5,000, which translate that to today. So 80-something years later, 82 years later, 83 years later, he made this movie in 1940. So it would be about $100,000, which still is pretty low budget for a movie. If you go back to that time, a year later, 2 years later, Casablanca, a higher end movie was made for about $1 million. There's some question was a little bit under, a little over $1 million. I was trying to find what the budgets were for a lot of the movies that I'm more familiar with from Monogram and PRC and others. I'm sure they were more than 5,000. Thinking about Blood of Jesus is that this movie was made for $5,000, but it grossed many, many times that over, and it had a very long staying power. Even though, again, it's not a high quality movie, because what can you make for $5,000? But considering that, it had a lot of talent in it, it had special effects, and it was a story, and a very maybe the story was kind of weak, but it was a morality tale where it opens up with the woman playing Williams's wife, the character Williams played, his wife. She's getting baptized with the Baptist church out in a lake somewhere. And they ask her, well, where's your husband? And, well, he's out hunting. They say he's out hunting on a Sunday to find some religion, and he's not interested in it. And they realize that also he's been stealing, but it's out of desperation. That when, he had his bag of the game that he caught hunting, that he shot, and he told the sister from the church that this was rabbits, but they were pretty big rabbits. So they realized they were hogs. And he said, "Well, they're wild hogs." And the wife said, "No, there are no wild hogs around here. You're shooting somebody's livestock." And he was feeling bad about that. He realized, but he said, "What could I do? We that's how you ate tonight. Was just because I shot these hogs." So there's a lot of drama in there, and
it's happening, of course, in the Deep South or somewhere in the South.
Yeah.
And right. And so basically, the wife is the religious one. Spencer's character Raz is the irreligious one, right?
Yeah, a lot of reviews I saw online claim that he's an atheist. I don't see there's anything theological.
He's just a lazy fellow. Just doesn't.
Yeah, he wants to go. He wants to enjoy himself. He's lazy. He doesn't feel like getting up and going to church or anything. And so, meanwhile, just accidentally, he drops his gun, and it shoots his wife.
Yeah, right.
And the bullet goes right through her, onto and hits a picture of Jesus on the wall.
All right. So in this pogo-like swamp area, as you're saying, Yitzchak, the authorities are not called in to investigate the shooting. There is a doctor, as I understand, that does come to the scene, but the woman
mentioned there's no you don't actually see the doctor, but the ladies from the church who were standing around singing and praying over her, mentioned that the doctor, said that the bullet actually that's how we find out that the bullet went right through her. And
so that's the exposition. In other words, in place of showing it, because they didn't have the technical means, what Spencer Williams does is he has the sort of like the Greek chorus of the choir of her friends sort of give exposition to the audience of what's occurring. That the bullet has gone through her, and now her soul is ascending.
Right. So they're telling her, they're telling him, because he's obviously distraught that he shot his wife. They're telling him, you have to pray and God can do a miracle. And meanwhile, when he steps out, they said there's no chance. She's a goner, because of that. So they're being somewhat hypocritical, maybe more than that, of saying, telling him to have faith and to find religion, but meanwhile, they themselves really don't think that there's any hope, and they.
And what's fascinating is that the challenge is not to Raz, right? The challenge is really to the spirit of the dead woman who is somehow taken by an angel, I guess, to the gates of St. Peter. But instead of going
St. Peter, we see an angel climbing a ladder. So that's the image of Jacob's ladder. And then the soul is taken to be tempted between the devil and the
right. That's a very interesting theology, isn't it? I mean, normally we say, even people that die inadvertently, accidentally before their time, we've seen films. I think the Pixar made a film called Soul recently about someone who was taken before his time, and can they come back, and what they can do. But here you have a soul that's taken before its time, seemingly a righteous soul, and that righteous soul is now tempted by the devil.
So she's presented with three roads: either to go back to earth, to go to heaven, or to go to hell. And interestingly, when they have a cross that's shown several times. That's kind of a directional signpost. And so to the left it says hell, and to the right it says Zion instead of heaven. And but anyway, hell is represented as that she is tempted. Really, it seems there's a fellow named Judas that the devil sends. He gives her some nice clothes and says, you're going to come to the city and you're going to get a job and you're going to make a lot of easy money doing very little work. It seems to be
obviously she's going to be a call girl of sorts.
Yeah. So but this is not in real life. This is in her vision, in her near-death experience, that she's being tempted like this, which again, like you said, I don't understand the theology behind this of a posthumous or semi-posthumous temptation that she's being faced with, and this fight over her soul after she's already, she's not dead yet, but she's almost dead, and she's being tempted. I guess, I mean, in a certain way, though, you can say, we say in our theology that every moment of life is precious because there remains bechira chofshis as long as a person is alive. So meaning that we protect life even when it seems like there's no hope, that Chayei Shah, that we're Mechal Shabbos even on Chayei Shah, and that the value of that Chayei Shah is the existence of Bechira Chofshis. And it would seem that even a person maybe in a comatose state, I guess that's what's kind of being represented here. I don't know if that's exactly the theology that Williams is trying to bring out here, but it seems like that's essentially what he's saying, that even though she's in this comatose state, she can still be damned to hell and lose her salvation by making a choice that's all in the olam of demyonis, that's all in a world of imagination and fantasy, that she can, and also that's a big musser there to show that all of the things of olam hazeh and of the city, that's what's represented by that, all of those things are just demyonis. That and so too in this world, everything is demyonis. So it's a big type of a musar that's being brought out here in this. Obviously, it's a very Christian movie, but it's not. But the theology is just, I don't even know where it comes from. It seems it's almost like a theology that Williams made up on his own. It's not. It's very hard to understand what the moral is here. And in a way, that's, I think, the powerful part of this movie, is that it's so ambiguous, and it's not something that's very clear, of, because it's not that lesson of, that is the classical evangelical idea of just being saved and then, you could be sure of your salvation. It's a type of
Does she have a chance through her choice to come back to life with her husband, or it's spoiling too much? Okay.
I mean, we could spoil it. I don't know how many people are gonna.
No, people don't want people want to have some drama, and they don't want necessarily things spoiled for them. But it would seem, again, I haven't seen it. It's definitely, despite its amateurishness, it sounds like it's ambitious, and
it strikes me. You know what it reminded me of was, especially when they were praying over her, it struck me it reminded me of Maurice Schwartz's Tevye, and when you see the mother, crying and saying God von Avram, and and the representation in a Jewish film made by Jews of Jewish culture and religion. Here you had a black film of that time for a black audience, made by black filmmakers, representing what black religion was, not even necessarily trying to make a theological point, but just representing real, raw, authentic, Southern Christian black culture of that era. And it's definitely a historical curiosity. I understand that some of his funding to make these movies actually came from the Catholic Church, which is very interesting because it's very obvious that these were Baptists. And yet the Catholic Church, I guess, felt
they had a vested interest, perhaps, in ensuring that the African American population, stayed close to religion. There was always, I think, the fear that even the white churches had, that it's good that it's good that those darkies are Bible thumpers. Otherwise, we would have a lot of trouble on our hands. And I think that might be, again, I'm looking at it very cynically, but that might be one of the reasons why they felt this is a good cause. Say the film has some humor in it. Is it like Stephen Fetchit type of humor? No, it isn't like you have the black characters acting ridiculous, right? You don't have
that. I mean, it would seem anachronistic today, but it's not. It's obviously not intended to be offensive. It's not a minstrel show for a white audience. this is made by blacks for blacks.
I understand.
And so and it it showcases talent of the church singing, and also they had a dancer, a woman who was doing an acrobatic dance in the nightclub that was actually very strange type of a thing, and also that was kind of the archetype of sin and vice in this film.
Is not meant to satirize blacks, but it is meant to speak to them where they are. And as I said, as these urban theaters, wherever they were not that removed from life in the Deep South. So this would resonate with them, whether it actually mirrored exactly their religious sensibilities. The people watching this film would nod in a familiar way.
Yeah. It certainly was anti-urban. It was making the statement of, the blacks who left the South to go to the big city and thinking that they're going to find, prosperity or something, or get away from racism and things. It was making a statement of, stay in your ghetto. Well, not the ghetto. Stay in your rural setting where you can be close to God. And it's definitely condemning. It's yeshivas krachim kosher type of idea of saying, don't go to the city. The city is hell. Stay in Zion. Zion is the Deep South, the Bayou, wherever, that's Zion. That's the. And so the other movie that I watched was it was another film that was written by, but not directed by Spencer Williams, but he starred in it, he was one of the stars. Son of Ingagi. Yeah. So a strange movie. Also some religious tones. It opens up with a wedding. It's about a newlywed couple who.
Now, let's just make people understand that there was a film called Ingagi that came out in 1930, right? And it did it
type of film,
and that does have African Americans playing dangerous tribesmen, a virgin sacrificed to a huge gorilla. So that was a film that I guess when Spencer Williams and whoever was funding him was working on this film, they figured they could rip off the title because this is sort of connected to something like Ingagi, right?
I guess so. I've never seen Ingagi, but I've heard it's quite pre-code, very very lurid, very exploitative type of a movie. And that movie is very interesting type of a movie because you have a female black mad scientist who has this monster missing link type of creature that she brought back from Africa when she was out doing some missionary work out in Africa. And apparently this couple who gets married in the beginning of the movie, it seemed like she was in love with the girl's father, who she had actually introduced to the girl's mother. And she left, her estate to them, and it was all kinds of interesting things. And when she gets killed, the newlywed couple, are suspected of killing her because she had left bequeathed her estate to them. And she also was fighting with her brother about gold that she brought back from Africa, some $20,000 worth of gold that she brought back from Africa, and her crooked brother is trying to get half of that, and so
there is a monster there, right? There is a monster. Yes.
Yeah, and the monster is killing people, and they're accusing this newlywed couple of the murders until they finally figure out. And Williams is the detective who's figuring all of this out. So
I'm just going to read from the poster that was meant to advertise this film. Half man, half beast, all hell broke loose when the mad monster escaped. Son of Ingagi, with an all-star, all-colored cast. A Richard C. Kahn production, distributed by SAC Amusement Enterprises.
Yeah, both of these were SAC Amusement. Both of these movies were made.
Right, and I would assume SAC and Richard Kahn are some of our tribesmen who were profiting from these films. and if you look at the image of this poster, Yitzchak, you'll see that it's quite a lurid one as well. And it's drawn like like a cartoon, but you can tell that this is also meant to try to get again the blacks in. So this is sort of like a monster detective film.
Yeah, it's the first all black monster movie, and it's a science fiction type of horror type of movie, and it's again, it's not even to the quality of the Poverty Row movies that I've been familiar with, Devil Bat, things like that, but it's of historical interest, particularly for fans of the genre movies that I am, to see that that these genres played into other places, and this one really had it. This story could have been really totally done by a white cast. There's nothing really particularly black about this story. It's just that it happens to have been done by an all black cast. I think that's really
so. It really doesn't add much to the theology or the sociology of
the police involved, as opposed to Blood of Jesus, where there's no police involvement, and it's just and it's almost like black on black crime is something that's ignored. Here you don't have that dynamic. Here you have, and I guess part of it is that this is a little bit more of would seem to be some kind of an urban environment as opposed to a very rural environment where probably there really wasn't much.
I get it.
Justice,
Now I think about this weird grafting of genres in films in the 30s and 40s, where even a hard-boiled noir is going to have a song in it that's sung by some lounge singer. There are songs in both of these films. The first one, especially in terms of The Blood of Jesus, there you're going to have, like in the clubs when she goes into whatever that urban place is, and I think there's some music. There's music in Son of Ingagi also, right?
Yeah. Also, there's also a nightclub scene where you don't have much of a music score, so which is kind of jarring. Is that how quiet the movie is when nobody's talking, but you do have a musical
singing group.
I don't know how well known the Four Toppers is the Toppers is how they are, how they're.
Clearly, they had to, whatever it was. I think what we're saying is that this black audience, like the all-colored audience who was going to go to see it, wanted to get a little bit of something, right? Again, this was a night out. Remember, they're leaving an apartment that's probably crowded, it's probably hot. We don't know what month it came out. The theaters were air conditioned. The theaters were a place to go, a haven. And what they would get for an hour is, maybe it was a double feature, some sort of entertainment that would somehow push the buttons. The question is like this: is this a shanda for Black America? Have these films been forgotten and not have these films been forgotten and in a way despised, but incorrectly? Are these films? Let me ask the question: are these films important for to show the progress that blacks have made, that where we've come from? Are they meant to be a morality message about we don't want anything like this? Let's just keep them in a museum to find out how terrible things were. How would you say one, especially a white person who is watching this, how should one look at these films?
I mean, the history of these movies was that they were pretty much forgotten until BET brought them back. So it was the black community that I mean, pretty much they're the ones who can decide how they want their history to be remembered. And there's certainly something to be said about these movies that were made for black audiences. These were not minstrel shows. These were not put down movies. These were, and I think for that reason, to show the ingenuity of what to do with such limited resources, because these are very amateurish movies. They almost feel like, in some ways, like a high school play or something, but made by adults. Only not because of the talent, because again, the talent that was presented, especially even the amateur talent, was very good for what we're dealing with. Not all the acting is, there's a lot of wooden and stilted acting, but the stories, sometimes don't make so much sense. But the fact that just to put a movie together, I remember someone said, when we talk about some particularly horrible movies, well, could you even put something like that together? Or if if you're criticizing these movies, and the accomplishment of putting it's like yesh ma'ayin. It's you're taking something from really nothing and making these movies. I think they are accomplishments, and they should be remembered in a way. I think for Spencer Williams, particularly, the fact that that which was forgotten, that he was a filmmaker and not only a sitcom actor. I think he deserves that part of his career to be remembered, because he put this work into it. And the one thing that I was mentioning was that I think I forgot to really put in there was that they were successful. That from $5,000, if he made
Right.
probably $100,000 back.
The SAC Corporation made some money.
Yeah, back. I'm sure these movies were played, as was the trend at the time. These movies were probably still being played for another 10 years. It wasn't just when they had their release. These were.
I understand. I understand. By the way, the Four Toppers were in another film called Mystery and Swing, which was, again, with 100% all-star colored cast, thrills, chills, music, and girls.
There were hundreds of these movies made from around 1915 until the last one that's known was about 1953, of an all-black movie. And the vast majority of them are lost. There's maybe about 100 that are around.
What's fascinating is that the black audiences wanted specifically an all-black cast. They actually understood innately that what was going on in the other Hollywood, the white Hollywood, where black actors, whether it was Canada Lee, or Juano Hernandez, or someone else who was getting, Paul wrote their 10 cents down to go spend the night watching. This was an attraction. It was an attraction to say it's an all-colored cast.
And I think it's very much like the Yiddish cinema that was at that same time.
Right. There was, in other words, you go to the familiar, you go to something, and it's possible. I think what we need to say is, although we need to bemoan, even what I would say is a liberal-minded person like Preston Sturges has figures in his films, even in his masterpiece Sullivan's Travels. He has, a black character that basically ends up being your typical buffoon. Whereas these films, although some of them might be a little bit, as you say, there might be some condescension there, but it would seem that these films treated their black characters and their story with more respect. When I told my friend, the producer at TCM, that you were going to be doing this, he said, "What movie are you talking about? Like Cabin in the Sky?" Now, Cabin in the Sky is really the exceptional film that was actually targeted for white audiences. Cabin in the Sky had a great budget. Of course, it had the I guess MGM, who made that film, wanted to sort of say, well, wow, we're making some money. These Poverty Row films, or whoever, which studio was making them, let's try a all black film and see if we can go mainstream. It's like how they just, again, obviously they're always looking of how to make some money. And is Cabin in the Sky painful to watch for blacks today? I'm not sure. Again, it's an all colored cast, so to speak, but they figured, hey, let's try this and let's put a lot of great production values in it. We'll see what happens.
Which never happened with the Yiddish theater, with the Yiddish cinema. That never happened. You didn't have any, it was all Jews running Hollywood, but they didn't want any Jewish stories, for a long time.
That white audiences didn't hate black characters. There was a appreciation of the tremendous talent that the black singers and actors had. And of course, I'm sure somebody from that community would say, well, of course, sing Negro, dance Negro, you need to entertain your white masters. I think that's the way they look at it. But I'm trying to be a little more, I guess, in a way, trying to be a little more understanding, that there was that the moguls, Jewish mavens, whoever, understood that there was a way to have Black talent reach out and benefit that Black talent as well. Obviously, there needed to be a tremendous amount of social change, and society needed to alter itself, because these same actors and actresses weren't able to stay in the same hotels or maybe even enter the same theaters where the movie was showing. But I think to dismiss completely these films as part of a segregationist mentality, as something, as George Wallace's home movies, I think is wrong. Cabin in the Sky is just proof that Black entertainment really is again one of the ways that Black culture and Black people in general, I think, can get a foothold in the greater society in a way that they could, for the betterment of everyone. Now, it definitely did not proceed so in such a linear fashion, but I think that's why I think the Black films, although you're right, they're just to get Blacks into the seats. I think the people in Hollywood, seeing the money come in and watching some of these films, realized that there needed to be more Blacks on the screen. Unfortunately, it took about 25 years, for that to happen in a way that was meaningful. And really, I think what you need to probably complement the period that we're talking about to the Blaxploitation films of the late 60s and early and mid 70s. These films were also targeted for an urban audience, whether it was Blackula or these other films, and in a way, they sort of, people look at them today also as demeaning. But I think there was a similar dynamic that was at play there in the Blaxploitation films. And there was also a way, again, I'm reaching here because I'm not from that community, but I think what I remember from the 70s was people liked walking around saying they're Superfly, right? Shaft, of course, was an attempt with Richard Roundtree to have a sort of a Black hero break through. And then, that's why Shaft was a very important film. Not only the theme music that everybody knew, but also the basic character of having, a Black detective who could be someone that could be a rugged star, even for a multiracial arc of how filmmaking reflects what's going on in society. The 70s was a period where there was a loosening of the bonds completely, and I think there's no more, the Blaxploitation films I don't think are being, they obviously they weren't made for that long, but I think they ushered in an era where since the early 80s and 90s, where Black characters have become a standard. And we do have films that you don't have to say it's an all Black cast, but you have films that are primarily about Black society. And again, it would seem that these films in the present time are being seen by and enjoyed by peoples of everywhere. Even thank you for really making me aware, and hopefully our listeners aware of this treasure trove, a place to really look, sort of almost like a documentary. And as we know, film in many ways preserves for us those images of what life was like. It's obviously done in a Hollywood style or in a barely Hollywood style. And I think if one realizes that these images are artificial, but still reflections of what life was like and of where people's mentality was, I think film is a wonderful time capsule. Obviously, even documentaries, Yitzchak, as we know, and we've talked about this on this program, are in themselves fictionalized and structured in order to sell a certain point of view. So in many ways, these films, whether they're the 40s films or the blaxploitation films of the 70s, in some ways, I think, reflect even a more true sense of where we were as a nation and in our relations with African Americans. All right, my friends, that's it. So we hopefully, I think next week, I think Yitzhak and I are going to go into a film, the films that represent, let's say, the traditional Hollywood studio trying to deal with race relations. And we're going to try to highlight some films next week, specifically what some people consider a masterpiece from John Ford. Others defame it as really a very hollow attempt. And we'll talk about everybody's favorite film about white and black relations from the early 60s, To Kill a Mockingbird. So we'll hopefully so watch your step on the way, everybody. We'll catch you again next week. Thanks for joining us for another episode from the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a single episode.